Hello, welcome. We are going to highlight, underline, and circle some of our guidelines. So if you have your ICD-10-CM 2026 book, let's go in and put some highlights on our guidelines. So we're going to go to the first chapter, Section A, and I'll tell you the page as we go. We're in Section 1, Conventions, General Coding Guidelines, and Chapter-Specific Guidelines. We're on page G3, and we're in Section A. So what we're going to do is make sure you have a red pen and some colorful highlighters, preferably light colors, so that you can actually see what you're highlighting and you'll be able to see through it. And make sure that your highlighters aren't bleeding through the page as well. So what we want to do is we're just going to make sure that we have a red pen, and let me just show you all of the highlighters that I have. So I kind of use an array of highlighters. So this is what I have. All right. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and we're going to start off in Section A. So what we're going to do is in Section 1, in Conventions, General Coding Guidelines, and Chapter-Specific Guidelines, we're going to highlight this one color. And the reason why we highlight this in one color, because they have 3 sections underneath this title. And the sections is A, Conventions for the ICD-10-CM. Your next section is, you turn to page G4, it's going to be B, General Coding Guidelines. And then if you turn the page to G7, you'll see chapter-specific coding guidelines. So we're going to make everything different so that you'll be able to know what section that you are in, okay? So we're going back to page G3. So for me, I guess I'll start with this. So this is our Section 1, and this is mostly our guidelines. So I'm going to make sure I highlight this, and I highlight this. Okay. And now we're going to do our 3 sections, A, B, and C. So you want to make those one color as well. So let's go ahead and do A. And we're going to, let me use my, if you have some rubber fingers, they're useful. Use it. We're going to go with B. And then we're going to turn that page. And we're going to go to our chapter specific, which is C. Okay. So now those are the only 3 sections that's in Section 1. So chapter-specific coding guidelines, this is where you'll find your chapter-specific, meaning this is chapter 1 through 22. Okay, and then in B, you'll find just general coding guidelines in this area here. And then in chapter under A, you'll find conventions for the ICD-10-CM. So we're going to go ahead and start highlighting some things, make them stand out so that you are aware of what's in your book. Okay. And so what we want to do is make sure we don't use the same colors that we used here. Let's go ahead and use a different color. And you can use 2 if you like. And you can do it however you see fit, honestly. Let's just go ahead and highlight. So for our alphabetical index and tabular list, this basically says it's just that. So this is letting you know that in the front of the book, we have an alphabetical index. And this works like a dictionary. It's in alphabetical order. And then once you see the code, you go to your tabular list. And the tabular list is all the colorful sections with the code. So this is the tabular area here. And this is your alphabetical index here. Okay, so that's why you have that. So the format and structure of your codes, they are basically alphanumeric. And the codes may range anywhere from 3 to 7 characters. So what we want to do is, let's go ahead and highlight that. 3 to 7 characters. Okay. And then we're just going to keep going down. So by number 4, placeholder, we need to know our placeholder is X. We want to go down to number 5 to 7th character. And this here, you'll see at the bottom of the page, it'll say 7th character. And we're going to highlight applicable 7th characters. So this lets you know that a 7th character may be applicable depending on the actual code itself. Okay. Next, we're going to make sure we highlight the abbreviations for NEC and NOS. This is going to be different, and we're going to use a different highlighter for that. We want to make sure we make that stand out. Okay. So alphabetical index abbreviations. And we're going to go ahead and do this. And let's go ahead and use tabular list abbreviations. And we're going to do this. Okay. And the main thing that we want to make sure that we know, because this question comes up a lot. So NEC is not elsewhere classifiable. Let's go ahead and underline that. And NOC is not otherwise specified. And let's go ahead and underline that. And we're going to do the same thing under this here so that you know exactly what it means. So anytime you see these next to the codes, NEC means not elsewhere classifiable, and NOS means not otherwise specified. Okay. Now we're going to go over to just kind of highlighting some things. Let's go ahead and highlight these brackets under punctuations. You got your brackets and you got your parentheses. So this is what you'll see in your book or whatever under some codes that you may have. All right. And if you want, you can highlight this as punctuations. And we can also do this for abbreviations. Okay. And I'll go ahead and do the format just so that you know what it is. All right, let's keep going. Now, on this side of the page, we're just going to make some other things stand out. And of course, they said use of and. This is going to be under section 14. So you see this code here. This says see section 1A14. So let me show you how to read your guidelines. When it says section 1, they're talking about this right here. When they're saying A, they're talking about this right here. Remember, I told you there are 3 sections under 3 areas under section 1. So this area is A. And then this last number is 14. So if we go to page, turn over, and go to number 14, there's and And let me pull the book over some so that you can see. 14, there's and right there. So that's how you read your guidelines. Okay, and I'll do it again just so that you know how to read your guidelines. The guidelines will always start with, and if you have issues with your book like I am, then just go ahead and put it through there. Otherwise, it's going to tear. But it'll always start with section 1, which you see right there. And let's do this. Section 1, and what it says, A, and then 14. Okay, so whenever you see your guidelines, when you see it looking like this here, it may have B. And if it has B, then you go section 1, you look for B, and B is right here. And then whatever number it tells you. Okay, so that's how we read the guidelines. All right, so now we're back here. Let's go ahead, and since this is going to be in 14, if you want, you can say, you can go to, and you could just put next page. And you can put number 14 right there. So you know where to look at for this here. Okay. Now, we're also going to do excludes notes. So this is very important because when you're looking at excludes notes, I'm sorry, I skipped a section, other codes and unspecified codes. Other, let's go ahead and highlight that. Other specified. So mostly when you see other specified, this code here is ending or has the number 8 in it. And then when you see unspecified, they normally have the number 9 in it. So other specified, meaning it's other specified, meaning that they're specifying it's in a different way, but it's considered other because they don't have a specific code for it. But if they just say unspecified, then you can just use the unspecified code. Or if they just say like, for instance, hypertension. Hypertension is just hypertension. And if you look at it, it'll say hypertension unspecified, right? Because we didn't specify what kind of hypertension. However, if we said it was hypertension with heart failure, now we're specifying that. So it'll be considered other, but you'll actually see a different code for it. Okay. All right. And then we're going to go on. We're going to go down to our includes note, and we're just going to go ahead and highlight that. We're going to do our inclusion terms here. And you'll see this word under some codes, not all. And then excludes notes. This is definitely something that you want to pay attention to because you see excludes 1 and excludes 2 very often, quite often. So we're going to highlight this, and then let's make this stand out. So excludes 1 means not coded here. And you just want to go ahead and highlight that. And then it kind of gives you a graph to let you know like how you can specify what it is. This here is unspecified. This is other specified. So this is kind of a graph that kind of lets you know what these are up here. So let's turn the page. We're going to page G4. And we're going to figure out what the excludes 2 means. And we used, just so that we're on the same color pattern, we're going to use excludes to, and then that means not included here. So highlight that. So just in case they ask for the guidelines and they ask you what excludes one or excludes two mean, here's your answer. There's your answer right there. Okay. All right. So we're just going to keep moving. All right. Now, etiology and manifestations. This area here, it says to code first, use additional code, and to in a disease classified elsewhere notes. We are going to highlight this because this is very important. You need to know when they say code first, what it means. Code first, note, and that's where we want to highlight that at. I need to just keep the tops off, huh? So this here, let's go ahead and highlight this right here. Okay. And then we're going to come down to the use additional. Let's see where that one is. So that the code first note at the manifestation code. These instructional notes indicate the proper sequencing order of the codes, etiology followed by the manifestation. Okay, so that's what code first mean. So you're using another code first and then this particular code. All right, and then let's do use additional. So code first and use additional codes. They appear, we definitely need to highlight this last paragraph here, because you need to know that. And I'm trying to find the use additional because it should be right here. Use additional, here it is right here. Note at the etiology. And this gives you your rules of sequencing. So if you're not sure how to sequence, these notes are definitely going to help you. Okay? All right. Now, let's go ahead and we're going to highlight and number 14. Oh, let's do it in blue. Okay. And it should be interpreted to mean and or when it appears in a title. So what we're going to do is we're going to underline and underline or. So that's what and means in here. Okay. And then we're going to go with, highlight with. And with means in, and this should be interpreted as associated with or due to. And we're going to go ahead and underline that as well. Okay. And let's go for see also, number 16. See also. Main term, and C means and the instructions following a main term. So you want to be sure that, let's go ahead and highlight that so we know what it is. Yes, highlight that whole paragraph. And then come up over here and it says see also. You want to make sure you are highlighting that as well. Okay. Code also note. Let's go ahead and highlight in blue. And then we're going to highlight this here, this note here. Going to use default codes in blue. Okay. And then code assignment clinical criteria. We don't have too much in there, but now we're finished with A. So let's go over to B. But before we do so, let's underline C also and C. And also underline code also. So now we're in section B. We're in this section. Now this here says general coding guidelines. So this is just basic guidelines on how you're coding, where you're coding, and what you're coding, basically in the areas that you're coding. So for this area here, if you want to change out your colors, let's go ahead and change out our colors. I'll use purple and orange for this color here. And if you want to keep the same color scheme, you can. But this is just how we make things kind of stand out if you want to. All right. And let's go ahead. This is your general coding guidelines. So what we're going to do is, this is just letting you know, locating a code in the ICD-10-CM. It's telling you to start in your alphabetical index. And once you get the code, to go into your tabular list. This is the level of detail in the code. And it's just letting you know that you have to make sure you complete the code once you go to the tabular list. And that code range can be anywhere from 3 to 7 characters. So we're going to do that. And then code or codes from A00 through T88.9. All of these codes here, it just lets you know that pretty much you'll have these here: signs, diagnoses, symptoms, conditions, problems, complaints. All these here can be for the encounters. So that's what these here are telling you. All right. Now let's go ahead and turn. We're on page G5. And now we're going to start making some things make a little bit sense. So signs and symptoms. Let's go ahead and highlight that. And what we want to highlight in here is basically the codes that describe symptoms and signs as appeared to diagnosis are acceptable for reporting purposes when a related definitive diagnosis has not been established or confirmed. So we're going to highlight this entire paragraph, right? I probably should have used another blue. This one kind of dark, but that's okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to circle not. So this guideline basically says you code signs and symptoms when there is not a definitive diagnosis, when it's not confirmed by the provider. Okay, and let's keep moving. Conditions that are integral part of the disease progress. This means that it is associated, it's routinely associated with the disease process. So for instance, if someone has osteoarthritis and they consistently have joint pain is an integral part of the disease process. So it's already included in there, so you don't have to code the joint pain. So let's go ahead and we're going to highlight. Let me use another blue because this one here is kind of dark. Yeah, that looks better. And then you have conditions that are not part of the integral process, right? So we're going to highlight that. And then it's not routinely, and we can do this, not be associated routinely, because that's what that means. Okay, so if someone has, say, we can use osteoarthritis again. If they have osteoarthritis and they get a break in the bone, it's not commonly for them to get a break in the bone. So it's not a part of the disease process. Okay. Multiple coding for a single condition. Let's go ahead and make sure we highlight this. And then when we highlight this, this here is just letting you know that it requires 2 codes to fully describe a single condition. That's basically what it's telling you. Okay, and then you have your examples here. So if you want to, you can go ahead and take and put a star by your examples so that you know. Then we have acute and chronic conditions. And what this is telling us is that if the same condition is described as both acute and chronic, and separate sub-entries exist in an alphabetical index at the same indentation level, code both and sequence the acute code first. So let's go ahead and highlight this paragraph. So basically, if they're saying the patient has acute sinusitis and chronic sinusitis, and they both have the codes for acute sinusitis and chronic sinusitis, then you will code it as the acute code first, which means acute sinusitis will be your primary diagnosis, and the secondary will be your chronic sinusitis. So that's what that guideline is telling you. Then you have your combination code. And your combination code is a single code used to classify, and here are your, let's go ahead and highlight that. You got 2 diagnoses. You can go ahead and highlight all of this right here. That's basically what it is. Okay. And if you want, you can actually start since you have so many things there. Let's go ahead and go sequela. It's a late effect. And you want to make sure you highlight a sequela is the residual effect condition produced after the acute phase of an illness or injury that has terminated. All right, so let's go ahead and highlight that sentence. Okay, and then after highlighting that sentence, they'll give you some examples in the next section here. And you'll see different things right here. So you have a sequela of a CVA, sequela of complications of pregnancy. So these are late effects. This is something that they're getting. So if someone has a stroke, and after the stroke, they get left-sided paralysis. The left-sided paralysis is the late effect of the stroke. Late effects, okay? And here, impending or threatened conditions. So, and this is, highlight that. And then what you can do is definitely make sure you pay attention to these here. If you want to highlight each of these, you can. But these are different occurrences. So you can either highlight them or you can do this. And that way you'll know what it is. This here says you can only report one diagnosis at a time, meaning you cannot report the same diagnosis. So let's just say if you're coding hypertension and you see in the diagnosis it was listed in the documentation twice, you can only code it once. That's what that's saying. It can only be reported one time. And we're going to do that. Code may be reported only once. That's what we need. And then we're going to go into laterality. And your laterality basically is your sides. It's your sides, right? So let's do, and if you want, here it is right here. Let's go ahead and highlight right there. Left, right, or is bilateral. That's what you want. That's your laterality. That's what it means. Left, right, or bilateral. Okay. All right, let's go to the next page. We're on page G6. G6. We're going to continue here. And we are on number 14. And let's continue. We have documentation by clinician other than the patient's provider. All right. And these exceptions include codes for, and we're going to just go ahead and just do that and highlight that. We're on page G6 at number 14. Okay. We have syndromes. And basically, this guideline states when you're coding a syndrome, it has to be documented as a syndrome. And we're going to assign codes for the documented manifestation of the syndrome. Right there. Assign codes for the documented manifestation of the syndrome. Then you have complication of care. I know this looks crazy, huh? Okay. Documentation of complication of care. And this is basically the documentation of the relationship between the condition and the care or procedure unless otherwise instructed by the classification. So the documentation is them pretty much telling you what is the complication of care. That's basically what this is. Okay. And one little piece of this will definitely help. Down here, last sentence, it says query. Of course, you can't do this for the test, but when you're in the work world, you can definitely do this. We're going to make sure we highlight that. Start at query the provider for clarification if the documentation is not clear as to the relationship between the condition and the care or procedure. And then borderline diagnosis is number 17. Let's highlight that. So this is something we definitely need to highlight. If the provider documents a borderline diagnosis at the time of discharge, the diagnosis is coded as confirmed. So we're going to highlight that. Right there. Okay. And then let's go down. It says no distinction is made between the care setting of inpatient versus outpatient. Make sure you highlight that as well. And then let's go over to 18. All right, use of signs and symptoms and unspecified codes. So for 18, basically, this is kind of self-explanatory. Self-explanatory. And this here is telling you about basically your signs and symptoms and your unspecified. They are acceptable if there is no definitive diagnosis. But if there is a definitive diagnosis, then you can actually use them. And right here it tells you that. If a definitive diagnosis has not been established by the end of the encounter, it is appropriate to report codes for signs and or symptoms in lieu of a definitive diagnosis. So we're going to go ahead and highlight that right there. I'm trying to get this marker correct. These are new, so of course they're bleeding out. And I'm telling y'all, don't use bleeding out markers, and I'm using them. Okay. And then the next section in chapter 19, this section here is basically, and we can highlight it. You may not have too many things. This is kind of like really in a hurricane aftermath. You'll have use external cause for morbidity, meaning how did it happen? What was the cause of the morbidity? Like, was it a hurricane? Was it a tornado? You're going to use these codes and you're going to sequence them secondary because these are not priority codes. But you can actually see what they are. So we're just going to go ahead and just highlight them like this. Okay. And now we're going to go to page G7. G7. And the next part we got is use of Z codes. Oh wait, we got to do that in orange. Okay. All right. And then what we're going to do here is these are applicable Z codes. So we can just basically do this. All right. And these will be for our actual applicable codes, Z codes. And here is a new guideline for 2026. And so we're going to highlight this. This is new. This was not in 2025, but it is now in 2026. And it says multiple sites coding. It says the classification defines multiple as involving 2 or more sites. So we want to make sure we highlight that. That's a new guideline. And it says, follow chapter-specific guidelines for assigning codes for multiple sites. In the absence of chapter-specific guidelines, assign codes describing specified sites individually when documented. And when the specified sites are not documented, assign the appropriate code for multiple sites. Okay? So actually, we're going to go ahead and highlight that whole paragraph, because it's very imperative that you know that. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to stop here. We have covered section 1 A and B. And because chapter C has 22 sections, we're going to do this section here all by itself. So see you on the next video. Thank you.